What's driving that? Is that a dictatorial management style that's driving it, or is it a culture shift, or is it a we're social animals? What's the thing that's actually bringing us back to pre-pandemic working, if that makes sense?
I think it's habit. I honestly think that humans are creatures of habit. I'm not a futurist. I'm not a psychologist or any of that kind of stuff. We are enablers. So we play in a space which enables real estate owners, operators and users to do what they want to do. So if they want to move offices, we help them do that. If they want to refurbish their office, we help them do that. If they want to undertake a strategy for what's next over the next 3 to 5 years, we do that. So we give them the tools. We're a toolbox. That can be design work, that can be technical services, feasibility, that can be CapEx benchmarking, that can be program and risk management, all the way through to actually designing and building.
Dan,
Chris,
welcome.
thank you.
It's great to have you in, and obviously we catch up quite regularly over beer and talk all sorts of office related stuff. And I thought, you know what, let's share this rather than with the locals in the local village pub. Let's share it with the world.
Yes, and your two beautiful daughters probably fell asleep with me and you talking.
Honestly, we get right into it, don't we? And the girls clearly are just, got a bit bored by it. But hey, any sleep time with the girls at the moment is good time. So thanks for coming in. Happy to help with the little one. Well, thanks for coming in, mate. I think for the listeners, really, who are you?
Thank you.
Who do you work for, and what do you do?
Workplace creations. That's and what do? I do a lot of things. The official job title is regional director, but then I've been called sales director, I've been called general manager, I've been called what do you actually do. So fundamentally, I look after our go-to-market proposition, and I take workplace creations out into the southeast in terms of finding new work, securing new work, and then making sure that we deliver what we say we're going to do.
Brilliant. And that's long and wide, right? That kind of workplace creations piece is long and wide. You're a big advocate for office relations. Talk me through it.
Good. Where do I start with this one? So I think if you look back at perhaps the last 5 years, we've all worked in London, and London is the epicenter of UK real estate and also international real estate. And since the pandemic, it really kind of set the tone in terms of what people in real estate, so real estate owners, operators, occupiers and users were doing. The regions, I think, is perhaps 3 to 5 years behind. So everything that we've seen in the last 5 years kind of been led by London. And one of the reasons why I joined Workplace Creations and why I focus on the Southeast is because the market dynamics now. So if you look at cost of capital, cost of construction, the fact that owners, operators, users of real estate kind of kick the can down the road because they were focusing on London. So in doing so, the time is now. It is literally now where people are looking at lease events, looking at investment cases, business plans, asset management kind of strategies, and they're starting to make those decisions. Now, not everyone is making a decision. Some people have decision paralysis, but then others that are perhaps a little bit more clear on their future direction of travel and perhaps stay nimble in their execution plans. So they make a decision, they're ballsy about it, but then they remain nimble, and you're starting to see more and more activity. I've got a mate, a chap called Simon Rickards. He heads up capital markets or capital investment at Knife Frank. Met him 20 years ago when we were playing football as graduates and that kind of stuff, Monday Night Lights. And he published, or his team published, the momentum markets.
Right.
And that just indicates some of the key gateway cities. So we all know Oxford and Cambridge, but Reading, the northern powerhouses, Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Bristol down in the south, Brighton, that M3 corridor, and then you kind of come round to where Dorking, Reigate, Maidstone is. There is a momentum building where rents are looking like they're increasing. Inquiries are increasing, but it's really all about prime office space. So prime in location and prime in specification. Yeah. You can look at that as an ESG kind of credentials. So how assets are future proof. But fundamentally, if people are going to come back to the office from their comfortable home offices, they need to go to a destination. So placemaking is key. So it has to be a great place. And fundamentally, the office renaissance is really playing around in those market dynamics. It's something that I heard coined at an event in the Battersea Power Station. So it was actually called the Renaissance of the Office. I was like, oh, maybe I should just, rebadge it as Office Renaissance. So we've got a mutual connection,
Yeah.
Beatrice.
It's great, Phil.
I'd talked to her about what I was seeing. She kind of helped shape the proposition. And then ultimately I listened to people which are much, much smarter than me, people that are higher up the value chain. So where there are investors, people that are directing capital, and they are looking to take advantage of the dislocation of valuations in the market. So what an owner is seeing versus what someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Really bright people like Richard Croft from Martley Capital. Didn't necessarily get it right this time round, but I think he's going to get it right next time out. Right. And then you look at the guys at Stoneweg, which was the ex-Cromwell guys. They're on the runway raising capital. I've got a good friend, John, JT at Northdale Partners. So people that know where the opportunity is, it's almost like the contrarian position. Although, and everyone said the office is dead. It's just not.
I was going to say, what is the pattern at the moment? So you mentioned in regional, the dislocation between London and the other powerhouses. What's the pattern? What do you see at the moment?
So I think it's nuanced, right? And I think that it really is driven by two things: lease events for occupiers where they are forced to do something, and ultimately real estate owners or operators, people that own the assets. And they've effectively had to reset the dial. Sometimes they've refinanced, sometimes they've just kind of cut low losses. But now there is a kind of a ground zero where people are building from. They kind of know where they are and they have to do something because there are pressures, be it a pension fund, be it a high net worth individual, be it the bank saying, right, come on, get rid of it, sat there. Yeah, and then occupiers as well. I mean, Workplace Creations is fortunate that we have a bed or a foundation of anchor clients. And some of those are rationalizing their real estate portfolio. So by rationalizing, sometimes it means taking less, that they're doing something. Sometimes it means taking more. And we're finding that they are acquiring other businesses. And through that acquisition, they then rationalize their portfolio, but they are creating destination hubs.
Yeah.
And you find that people don't necessarily want to commute, but then they don't want to work in the white office cell block of their home office.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a social animal. We're all social animals. And if you just look at Darwinianism, we've all evolved through being together.
Yeah.
So yes, the social experiment, we can work from home and accelerated X, Y, and Z. Great.
But why is it going to change?
Yeah. Why is it going to change? Well, I mean, we're all creatures of habits, right? Humans are creatures of habits. So over the last 5 years, we can see people are returning, and it's not even returning as in kind of a present participle, and it's happening. They've already returned.
What is driving that? Because I've had this conversation numerous times on this podcast with various people who are all experts in their own right. What's driving that? Is that a dictatorial management style that's driving it, or is it a culture shift, or is it we're social animals? What's the thing that's actually bringing us back to pre-pandemic working, if that makes sense?
I think it's habit. I honestly think that humans are creatures of habit. I'm not a futurist. I'm not a psychologist or any of that kind of stuff. We are enablers. So we play in a space which enables real estate owners, operators and users to do what they want to do. So if they want to move offices, we help them do that. If they want to refurbish their office, we help them do that. If they want to undertake a strategy for what's next over the next 3 to 5 years, we do that. So we give them the tools. We're a toolbox. That can be design work, that can be technical services, feasibility, that can be CapEx benchmarking, that can be program and risk management, all the way through to actually designing and building offices.
So you do the builds as well then. And what are the common themes that people are having with their design at the moment, and what are the common main pains that they're talking about when it comes to a new building that they're looking at? What does that look like?
So future proofing is buzzed around a lot. That's quite a good buzzword. And what does that actually mean? Well, you proof your office to the future. You make sure that it's fit for purpose. Now, there isn't a one size fits all. And I think that people are driving value. So they're probably taking or making more time to inform their decisions, so that when they invest, which they have to do, and we talked about cost of capital being more expensive, cost of construction being more expensive, and designing for the future or designing for disassembly so that they remain flexible, I think that's what future proofing is, but it means different things to different businesses. So you may well have a salesperson that needs to be in and out of the office. So the way that their working day or working week plays out is different from, say, someone in finance and procurement, which is then different from someone in operations and kind of project management and delivery, and then again in design. So ultimately, I think that's what we've taken away. That our office in London has been restacked. We went from 2 floors to 4 floors. So we rationalized, but we took more in line with our business plan. And we've got 4 very distinct floors. So you've got workplace life, which is a ground floor amenity, kind of cafe rich destination for events and for collaboration. Then you've got Workplace Connect, I'm just testing myself now, which is the sales business development.
So yeah, sure. There's a test at the end, there's an exam at the end.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get marks. Then you've got Workplace Focus, which I'm banned from because that is quiet working and I'm too loud. And then you've got Workplace Create, which is the design studio. So they inform the other. It works for us, but what works for us doesn't work for everyone else. All we look to do is listen.
Yeah.
And then we apply what we're seeing in the market and the market dynamics, and also speaking to people like yourself. You and I had a really great chat about proactive maintenance and what would you call it? The kind of foresight to get ahead of things. So if a TV or your AV breaks, which is super critical, rather than just be reactive, you're like, actually, we know the warranty's coming up, or it was pat tested, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's the name of the game. Is all about experience and service.
Yeah.
All about that.
Absolutely. And you're going much more, much deeper than just beanbags, darts boards, and, foosball tables and stuff like that. What's the functionality of that space? You've already mentioned if people are starting to go back into it, but what are the key things that you're thinking about when it comes to the point of the office? What's the functionality of it? And how the classic Reba stages, right? This is a really long way to answer the question, to ask the question rather. But the classic Reba stages are your technology is kind of involved around stage 4. Are you seeing a shift in that now, given that the technology and the collaboration tools that are provided are so critical to an office? Are we bringing that shift earlier in the Reba stages or not?
I think we are.
And who's driving that?
I think that it's everyone that's got their head switched on. I genuinely think that that's the case. There are people, let's put it this way, right? If you do the same thing, you will get the same results. If you do the same thing and you expect to get different results, it's the definition of insanity. So to get different results, you have to do something different. And you and I had that debate about the real estate value chain, top down. So you've got real estate owner, real estate occupier, operator, a bunch of consultants, and then the contractors. And a lot of the problems that we experience when you really get into the nuts and bolts of it is elongation of kind of programs and timelines. You struggle with transparency on costs, and then you've got so many different opinions that it's like, what's the right product? What's the right solution? And if you look at the manufacturing world in design and construction, it's moved from that linear kind of top down or horizontal kind of approach into something which is circular. So everyone knows King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and why King Arthur decided to move to a round table, because everyone was equal. So if you transition from that top-down linear model into something which is circular, where you have 4 or 5 key stakeholders. So you would have you and I as consultant contractors, as I like to call people that think beyond just building stuff. How can we add value? How can we solve problems? You then have the operating partner or the occupier saying, look, this is what I need or what I can do for the real estate owner. And then everyone just recognizes that there's a skills and knowledge deficit with everyone in the table. So you work collaboratively with transparency, honesty, integrity, and trust. And then there's a common goal, like a mission, where everyone understands and they work towards it. And then ultimately, as long as everyone's committed to that and they hold up their end of the bargain, you're going to get to an outcome in those office renaissance market dynamics that you talked about, that you wouldn't normally get to, because all of the problems of lots of different consultants all fighting over each other to say, I know the answer, Then they pass the risk down onto the supply chain. And with the changes in principal designer and principal contracting responsibilities and building regulations, well, actually, you need the people that know what they're talking about, who are owning the risk and who are the enabler in that round table formula.
And that's the key. They need the seats at the round table. So I love the round table concept, by the way. It's not a metaphor that I've come across before, but it's right. The omission is in the middle of the in the middle of the round formation, then actually everyone's looking at the same thing and everyone's...
Yeah, and I kind of look at it like this, right? So when you were dating your wife, right, you're a traditional man,
Careful where we go again.
a man of honor. So when you first went on a date, you probably asked her out and you probably picked up the bill.
Yeah.
And then you got to know each other a little bit, and then you decided to be exclusive. And then probably a little bit longer, and you decided to move in together. Now, at that point, you wouldn't have moved in together at the first day. Okay, you wouldn't have.
No.
Because you didn't know
where this is going.
because you didn't know each other.
Right.
But over that weeks, months, even years, perhaps, you then got to know each other. And then when you decide to get a flat or a house or whatever it was you got, you then decided what's the budget. So you start to find out what each other earns, likes, dislikes, where you want to live, all of those personal things. And then you move in together. You might have got married or had a child, whichever way around you want to do it. Then you're like, actually, we should probably buy a house. And that's when you really get to know someone. Again, you go back to that first date, you want to buy a house with someone on the first date. So then you get to really understand everyone. And you kind of, or everyone understands each other. You then get to a point where you know everything transparently. And it's like a business, right? It's like a joint venture. A marriage and buying a house is a joint venture. And you can look at your household spreadsheet as a shared P&L. Money comes in, money goes out. And at that point, there is true transparency, true trust, and true knowledge and integrity, where if you don't do what you say you're going to do, your wife is going to come after you hard.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
And the same vice versa. So ultimately, I look at the transition from the top-down linear value chain to the circular Knights of the Round Table in that way, that it takes time and trust and confidence and doing what you say you're going to do to get to that point, which is exactly the same in life, personal life and professional life.
And then you have children and you get pushed back down the hierarchy table again. Yeah, right. But that's all right. Don't worry about it. So yeah, like I say, that metaphor is great. I've not come across it before, but I think it's, I mean, look, if we could give that message out to the problem with it is it's a full industry change, right? It's not a me and you having a chat over a beer or over a podcast and we're not going to fix it. It's a full industry message that needs to change, not just a hierarchical thing.
Yeah, and I think if you look at it, it's generational. So you and I have talked about it, like the time being out on that. I know I don't look 40, but I am 40. So I looked back at last year. I was like, where did I get into this seat where I have all this responsibility, personal and professional? You just kind of stumble upon it. We now make more decisions. You run your own business, and I'm inspired by your story. And I'm not just saying that because we're on your podcast, but I genuinely am. And as soon as you take accountability and ownership and responsibility for your little bit, you then realize that there's nothing stopping you. You can drive it forward. It's how far, how fast, like the marathon we were talking about. And ultimately, the generation that is coming up to retirement, they have less of a vested interest because they've done their hard yards. So change is difficult. They aren't necessarily going to drive change. They will be phasing out. And then the next generation of leaders and business drivers, you and I and other people in our generation, are going to push that forward. And then ultimately you look at our children. So your two little girls and my son and daughter, there'll be a few generations down the line and they will then push change. So I think you then just look back at just the kind of the natural dynamics market or Darwinian evolution. We have a time, we make an impact, and then you kind of pass that baton on.
So that's a good point as well around senior leaders, executives, people who have got the budget that are making these decisions. There's an argument to be said that they're very experienced. They're not all old, they're not all retiring, but there's a large proportion that are. So if that's the case and they're making future-based decisions on what the future of the office looks like, how do you match the challenge of they're retiring in 3 years against, I know you are not going to see it, but this is the type of solution you need to be putting in place, which is going to last you for 10 years. How do you tackle that conversation?
Mate, it's really tough. We
Yeah.
were talking about it this morning about how you get stakeholders on board, and some people are eyes wide open and they completely get it, and others just aren't.
Yeah.
And there's an education piece, there's a upskilling piece. I think that it's all about communication, and I think it's about a what's in it for them.
Yeah.
So you have to go through that journey speaking very, very candidly. Radical candor. You and I have talked about that, Kim Scott. There's another chap as well. We did an event with Stephen Shedletsky. He is excellent. Speak up culture. And I think it's just about peeling back all of the bullshit, the corporateness,
Yeah.
and you just try and connect with that human being on a personal and professional basis, and you just try and dial into what's in it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, yeah. Again, I don't know the answers to this stuff. These are just really good conversations to have where it's like, well, we're talking about future technology. We're talking about getting people back into the office. We're talking about future workspace. What does that look like? And actually, people who are signing off some of this stuff, really, you need to be dialing into what the selfishness of people almost and say, well, this is why it's important for you.
Yeah, and I think if you look at what you guys do, right, I'm a bit of an analog man, a dinosaur when it comes to technology and stuff. If it works, and for me, when I say it works, it's the experience. No one likes to go into something like this and got great TVs and acoustic panels and stuff. I like to push a button and it works. Now, how do you do that? Well, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to call you or someone that does know the answer. So when you look at that circular model, it's all about aligning yourself to people that know more than you and are an expert in that part where you're not an expert. And I call it the aggregation of collective experience. So you by yourself or me by myself, you can only achieve so much. But if you aggregate yourself with people that know more than you, you're not the smartest person in the room, and you're humble enough to realize that,
Yeah.
then that's a really great place to be, because you know that you're innovating, you're making change, and fundamentally the proof is in the execution. So when you get to a point whereby you can look ahead and then you look back and did that, we did that, we did that. But then what you're going to do in the future isn't by replicating that.
Yeah.
It's by evolving, and you're constantly going through that evolution and just executing with discipline and consistency.
Yeah.
What you say you're going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And give me that term again? Aggregation.
Aggregation of the collective.
That I go as well. And there's another little nugget that just maybe got. Do you know what he's bang on? I watched. I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix. Bill Gates. He's got a little mini series on Netflix, and he's talking to the COVID non-vaccine crew and talking about why the non-vaccine, I can't remember what the term is that they use, but I'm not having a vaccine because Bill Gates has planted chips in it, and he's speaking to them. And what he's not doing is trying to justify that, actually, I haven't put any chips in any of that stuff, but he's just asking questions. And I was like, do you know what? This is the guy who's getting hammered left, right, and center. But your aggregation story that you just mentioned there, that reminded me of Bill Gates, who's just going, I'm going to ask some questions about why you think this. What's the reason? What's the implications of it? Etc. Etc. So I think that's something that the not the smartest man in the room concept is really important. So that's good discussion.
You and I like sports as well. So I'm not a cyclist, but Sir David Brailsford, and everyone knows how successful the British GB cycling team was over the last decade. And he wrote a book, and it was the aggregation of marginal gains. So you do one thing better, great. You do two things better, great. You do 100 things better. And that's everything from psychology, nutrition, training, preparation, the technology, say the Lycra, the shoes, the bike, all of these things, all those little 1% add up. And when someone gets knighted, and you've got a bunch of gold medalists like Sir Chris Hoy, Sir Bradley Wiggins, all of Mark Cavendish, all of these great guys, Sir Jason Kenney, male and female as well. It is incredible, the power of aggregation.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And so we've spoken quite a bit in over these past half an hour. So on all of the things that you bring in terms of an office renaissance. We haven't spoken yet about challenges. What are the challenges that people are facing at the moment? So we've spoken about central hubs in Liverpool, Manchester, Bristol, all those areas. And that's all great. But what are the roadblocks that people are facing when it comes to thinking about their office moves?
So I think it's the big macro stuff. So social, political, and economic. Cost of capital is expensive. Like interest rates are still relatively high from what they were being artificially low for the last decade.
Yeah.
I'd say. Again, where we're operating, so everyone's getting squeezed. Supply chain, cost of raw materials. We're still talking about the war in Ukraine. It's just challenging across the world. I don't think I've ever worked in a tougher set of global conditions, but I've never been better, as in my knowledge, my experience, the people I work with. And I think the thing which really fascinates me is that it's going to get harder. So we're going to have to keep getting better, keep improving. And it just keeps reminding me that if you do the same stuff, you're going to get the same results. And that's just not good enough.
Yeah, and getting hard is an interesting one as well, though. So if it is getting harder and we're in a hard, economic climate at the moment, then doesn't that lend itself to that hierarchical subcontractor type relationship? Because people are struggling for those extra margins, so they're trying to save it from the bottom up. So how is your office renaissance conversation around the nights at the round table? How is that conversation? Is it challenging, given that the economic climate at the moment lends itself to trying to squeeze margins as much as you can? What's the dynamic around those conversations, given those two different dynamics that I've just mentioned?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've never even thought of it like honestly. Some people are open to it and other people aren't. I think when and it's only recently that I've come up with the King Arthur analogy. It's taken me a year or so to kind of bottom this out. But it's been informed by conversations. So I'm not a genius and I'm not looking at kind of making something new. I'm just thinking, how can we be better? I'm not looking to be right. I'm looking at getting it right. And why do I want to get it right? Well, because we've been getting it wrong for so long. We really have. And if you want to build for the future and if you want to build something meaningful, then ultimately you have to think of a different way of doing things. And that's really where we are. So we've got a really great example where we have a very, very forward-thinking visionary entrepreneur. And he bought an asset in a regional business park, which would never have been let. Never in a million years.
Right.
He then, I sat down with him because one of the people in our business has got a relationship and he's like, Dan, what would you do with it? So I said, we don't even know what we're looking at the moment. We really don't. So I think we need to strip it back to its essence, so a shell and core, and then we need to go through a design exercise. He said, that makes sense. So he signed a piece of paper which enabled us to do that. And then we got to Christmas and he said, what do you think you need to do next? And I was like, well, if you want to start doing it, there are procurement challenges. So we need to sign another piece of paper which says it's going to kind of commence the procurement of all of your long lead items, so mechanical kit. Some of it was the infrastructure, the technical services, all of the future-proof stuff. So again, I was quite surprised he signed it off. So he started to see it. Now, we've gone through this collaborative journey where we did what we said we were going to do.
Yeah.
Nothing more, nothing less. And I've realized that if you do that and you don't overpromise and you over-deliver, you're better than 95% of everyone else in the market.
Man, you've got to be brutally honest as well.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I've learned
100%.
all of this journey, when I first left the military and started in sales, I thought you had to be that sales guy where it was like, yeah, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. And what I've realized over the years is that just becomes, cheap snake oil salesman. And the reality is, if you're brutally honest to people and you almost to the point where it can be seen as detrimental. Actually, what you're building is complete and utter transparency and trust, where people go, I will speak to that guy because last time he told me something that didn't benefit him directly. And so that's on a sales side of things. I think I'm completely aligning with what you're talking about there. Yeah, brilliant. And what are your thoughts then? So what are the underlying things I always have on these podcasts is, if you've almost answered the question with your story that you gave me a few minutes ago. I wanted to elaborate on it. One of the questions I always have is if there's a person or people that have got a lease event coming up, they've got an office move over the next 12, 18 months, and they're responsible for the facets of designing that space and getting it ready for PC. The question is, what don't they know that they should know?
Yeah. So we definitely, but I think you can look at it from the way that things were done and the way that things are trying to be done, or that we are trying to do it. It's real estate's like a juggernaut, right? So a big oil tanker, you've got the little joystick, and then it's connected to all these mechanics and electronics, tiny little joystick. You push it left or right or forward or back, and then the rudder and the propellers change. But the juggernaut of the oil tanker has got a turning circle like the equator. It just takes forever. So I say we try because it's constant. And it comes down to partnerships, and it comes back down to being really honest with yourself. It's like, what do I know and what don't I know? And if I don't know something, I hold my hands up.
Yeah.
I say I don't know. And no one's ever going to shoot you for that. Literally, they're like, okay, refreshing.
Yeah.
You're not going to be that sales guy or consultant that's trying to sell the dream and the one size fits all. It's like, it doesn't. One size fits no one.
Yeah, of course.
So partnerships are so critical, that you're aligned with people that have the same moral compass, that share the same values, that are trying to do things the same way. Now, you might have a project, and let's just say it's £1 million, and you try and do it the old ways, and that top-down value chain, and it's just not a good experience. It's hard work. It's a proper arm wrestle. We've all been there. No one wants to work like that anymore. No one ever wanted to work like that, by the way.
Yeah.
So you look at a different way of doing it, and instead of getting 100% of that, maybe you just get 25 or 30 or 40%. But then actually it's an enjoyable experience. You find that the outcome is better. You then end up having more doors open. So partnerships with people, they're like, actually, I quite like how these guys or girls, operate. Or easier. It's never easy, I'll smash it, yeah. And it was enjoyable and it's fun. And professional, execute, do what you say you're going to do with discipline and consistency. And it's like anything, right? You and I were talking about marathon training. The first time I did a half marathon or a full marathon, it killed me. But then it becomes easier, and it's just that repetition.
Yeah.
And then just continuing. Yeah, and that's I think that's just my view on it. It's very, very partnership based.
Have the partnerships in place. Yeah. Make sure you trust your advisors. Yeah, I think it's great advice and something that a lot of people could definitely hear. Last question. I know we've got, we're running a little bit low on time, and I want to try and get as much value out of you as I possibly can. We've mentioned a little bit economic climate, geopolitical challenges that we've got going on, governments making decisions that not necessarily everybody agrees with. What are your conversations with business leaders? Business leaders have a need. There's a lease event. There's a need for them to change offices. Given the challenges that we've just spoken about from a capital, perspective, versus the requirement for them to build a meeting space which is collaborative, which attracts people in. Those two that you kind of want it's the lemonade wages. What's that term that's used? I can't remember. Champagne tasters, lemonade wages. So given you've got this requirement for future proofing and making it all swanky danky and get people in the office, versus the geopolitical challenges and the capital challenges that are going on at the moment, what advice would you give to leaders in terms of priority of funding for those guys?
There's a few things at doing it. We talk about partnerships, so we partner with companies that finance investment, and then they amortize it over the duration of the lease. One other thing that I think we're seeing is the alignment of interests between real estate owners, landlords, asset managers, developers, and then operators, occupiers, and users. So never has it been so close. So actually, those conversations, when it's upstream, before you or I perhaps are even at the table, between leasing agents or investment agents, there is actually a sentiment, or more of a sentiment, towards deal making. Everyone's always wanted to make deals happen, but actually there's perhaps a little bit more tolerance as to well, actually, if we concede this, we might get that.
Yeah.
Because without that partnership, without that collaboration, without that we're all in it together mentality, King Arthur and the Round Table again, you just don't get anywhere.
Yeah.
and people won't invest or commit to a new office or a new location or transaction. So fundamentally, everyone's had to kind of take a step back and then just realize. And then I think it comes back down to knowing your business, knowing your people, doing your due diligence, having analysis and data sets to fall back on, and then just being pretty critical and candid with your decision making. And then once you do it, you've done that, you commit, you're all in. Yeah, always and always, as I like to call it. And then you remain nimble. And as long as you've got the right partners, the best laid plans are never going to be fully executed. You pivot, you change. But as human beings and Darwinian evolution, we're pretty good at that now.
Yeah. Once you get punched in the face, as long as you've got people surrounding us, you safe with me. Maybe not anymore. Definitely not. Mate, Dan, as you know, mate, I can talk to you for hours, and we will talk for hours again over a couple of drinks and stuff as we normally do. But again, given the conversations that we have privately, the knowledge and kind of sharing that you've got, I think is perfect for this type of platform. So thanks for coming in. How can people get hold of you if they want to get hold of you? What's the best way that people can, be inspired by your talking about and want to learn a bit more?
Best way, probably LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I've worked on how I communicate our go-to-market proposition, my own personal brand. I was blown away actually by some of the stats that obviously we all know people buy from people. I'm very fortunate that the opportunity and the seat that I sit in at Workplace Creation and the autonomy that's been afforded to me by Ross and Colleen and the company is huge. So I don't take that for granted. It is a privilege, and ultimately I need to make the most of that opportunity. I think that, if you look at 5 years ago, design, construction, offices, no one wanted anything to do with it. And it was probably one of the worst industries to be in. We've kind of come through that. We're now kind of on the way up. And I think that the leasing and the investment market is, again, somewhere on that curve. And there'll be people that are much better informed than me to advise of that. So yeah, back to your question, probably LinkedIn.